The last line of defense. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of Ganymede Station, her weathered hands clasped behind her back, as she watched humanity's last defensive line take shape. The assembled fleet looked impressive enough. 73 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under Jupiter's reflected light. But Chen knew better. She'd watched the Nexus tear through bigger fleets like tissue paper. The aliens had appeared 6 months ago, their massive biomechanical high ships emerging from the depths of interstellar space. They hadn't bothered with declarations of war or demands for surrender. Their ships, writhing masses of organic technology that defied human understanding, simply started consuming everything in their path. Colonies, stations, ships, all were broken down into raw materials to feed the endless hunger of the Nexus swarm. Admiral, the Hyperion is requesting permission to dock. Lieutenant Rivera's voice broke through her thoughts. Captain Walsh says it's urgent. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Grant them immediate clearance. And Lieutenant, have Dr. Petal meet us in Lab 7. The Hyperion was humanity's best-kept secret, a destroyer that had been stripped down and rebuilt using principles that would make any traditional naval architect blanch. When the Nexus had first appeared, they'd captured a small piece of one of their ships. Most of Earth's scientists had tried to understand it. James Walsh and Priya Patel had decided to break it instead. The docking procedure took less than 10 minutes, and Chen made her way through the station's corridors with practiced efficiency. She found Walsh and Patil already waiting in the lab, both looking like they hadn't slept in days. Knowing them, they probably hadn't. "Show me," Chen said without preamble. Walsh grinned, the expression making him look younger than his 50 years. He pulled up a holographic display showing the Hyperion's latest engagement. "We caught up with a Nexus scout near Saturn's rings. Watch what happens when we hit them with the modified weapons." The footage showed the Hyperion approaching a Nexus vessel, all twisted organic curves and pulsing energy nodes. But instead of maintaining the careful distance that had become standard doctrine, the Hyperion closed to point-blank range. Its weapons fired, but not in the precise, controlled bursts that characterized human military technology. Instead, the energy weapons seemed to hiccup and stutter, producing an erratic pattern that made Chen's eyes hurt to watch. The effect on the Nexus ship was immediate and catastrophic. Where their adaptive shields had always been able to analyze and counter human weapons, this chaotic energy pattern seemed to bypass their defenses entirely. The organic components of the ship began to spasm and deteriorate, like cells exposed to radiation. "How?" Chen asked, her mind already racing with tactical possibilities. Dr. Patel stepped forward, her dark eyes bright with excitement. "We stopped trying to make their technology work properly. Instead, we deliberately introduced flaws and inconsistencies. The Nexus ships are perfect machines, every system working in harmony. But that perfection is also a weakness. They can't adapt to genuine chaos because they've never needed to." Walsh nodded. "We took everything we thought we knew about proper military engineering and threw it out the airlock. The Hyperion systems are held together with the technological equivalent of duct tape and paper clips. By human standards, it's a mess. By Nexus standards, it's incomprehensible." Chen studied the footage again. The Hyperion's weapons hadn't just damaged the Nexus ship, they'd made it sick. The biomechanical hybrid systems that made the aliens so powerful had turned against them when exposed to humanity's deliberate imperfection. "How quickly can we modify other ships to use these techniques?" she asked. Walsh and Patel exchanged glances. "That's the problem," Walsh said. "The modifications are incredibly unstable. We've lost 3 prototype weapons during testing. The Hyperion works because we rebuilt her from the ground up with these principles in mind. Trying to retrofit existing ships would be dangerous." Chen turned back to the viewport, watching her carefully arranged fleet. In 12 hours, long-range sensors indicated that a massive Nexus fleet would arrive. Nearly 30 high ships, each capable of consuming entire moons for raw materials. the kind of force that had already destroyed Mars Colony and the settlements on Europa. "How many ships could we convert in 12 hours?" she asked quietly. "Maybe 5, if we pushed the engineering teams to their limits," Walsh replied. "And there's a real chance they'd blow themselves up the first time they fire." Chen nodded slowly. "Do it. Choose the ships with the most experienced crews. And get me everything you have on these tactical principles. If we survive the next 24 hours, we're going to need to rebuild our entire fleet." As Walsh and Patel hurried off to begin the modifications, Chen remained at the viewport. The carefully arranged formation below suddenly looked wrong to her eyes. Too perfect, too predictable. Everything that humanity had thought made them strong, precision, coordination, careful planning, had proved useless against the Nexus. Perhaps it was time to embrace chaos instead. 12 hours later, Chen stood on the bridge of the Hyperion, watching as the massive Nexus fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The biomechanical high ships were beautiful in their own alien way, their organic curves highlighting the fundamental difference between human and Nexus philosophy. Where humanity built things, the Nexus grew them. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast to the fleet. "You've all been briefed on the new tactical protocols. I know they go against everything you've been taught. I know they sound insane. But conventional warfare has failed us. It's time to show these perfect beings what human improvisation looks like." She turned to Walsh, who sat at the weapons console with a manic grin. "Captain Walsh, you have weapons free. Let's show them why they should have never picked a fight with the species that invented jazz." The battle that followed would later be known as the Newton's Cradle Massacre, named for the chaotic cascade of destruction that rippled through the Nexus fleet. The modified human ships moved like drunk dancers, their formations deliberately imperfect, their weapons firing with calculated randomness. The Nexus, faced with an enemy that defied their fundamental understanding of warfare, began to make mistakes. And in space, mistakes were fatal, breaking every rule. The Nexus fleet moved with unsettling grace, their biomechanical ships flowing into attack formations with perfect precision. Admiral Chen watched from the Hyperion's bridge as the massive high ships spread out in a complex geometric pattern that somehow felt both beautiful and deadly. Under normal circumstances, such a display of coordinated power would have been terrifying. Today, it made her smile. "All modified ships, execute Protocol Chaos," Chen ordered, her voice steady despite the stakes. "Remember your training. Don't think. Feel. Act. The moment you try to plan too far ahead is the moment that they'll predict you." The 5 modified ships, led by the Hyperion, broke formation in ways that would have gotten their commanders court-martialed just a week ago. They moved like leaves in a storm, their trajectories seemingly random but guided by human intuition rather than computer precision. The rest of the fleet maintained standard formation, ready to provide supporting fire and act as a distraction. "Nexus ships are responding," Lieutenant Rivera reported from the tactical station. "There, they appear confused, Admiral. Their formation is shifting to account for our movements, but they keep adjusting and readjusting, like they can't settle on a solution." Dr. Patel, who had insisted on staying aboard to monitor the modified systems, looked up from her console with excitement. "That's it. Their tactical computers are trying to find patterns in our movements to predict our attacks. But there are no patterns to find." The first exchange of fire proved the theory correct. The Nexus ships launched their energy weapons, beautiful spirals of coherent force that could slice through traditional shields like paper. But the modified human ships weren't where those perfect calculations said they should be. Instead, they weaved through the deadly lattice of energy beams like dancers improvising to music only they could hear. "Weapons free," Chen commanded. "Show them what controlled chaos looks like." The Hyperion's weapons opened up first. Instead of the precise, coordinated salvos that characterized human military doctrine, they fired in stuttering bursts. The energy beams hiccuped and wavered, their power fluctuating in ways that should have made them useless. But when they struck the nearest Nexus ship, the effect was devastating. The alien vessel's organic components began to convulse, its perfect symmetry disrupted by the unpredictable energy patterns. Where it tried to adapt, the randomness of the attack simply shifted, preventing its defensive systems from finding a solution. It was like trying to develop an immunity to a disease that kept mutating. Other ships, concentrate fire on designated targets, Chen ordered. Don't synchronize your attacks. The more random and chaotic our assault, the less they can adapt. The massive Hive ship, easily 10 times the size of the Hyperion, began to show visible signs of distress. Its biological components pulsed erratically, and its mechanical systems sparked with uncontrolled energy discharges. The perfect merger of organic and mechanical technology that made the Nexus so powerful was becoming their greatest vulnerability. All ships, focus fire on that Hive ship, Chen ordered. Different attack vectors, varying energy patterns. Don't give their adaptive systems anything consistent to latch onto. The modified human ships swooped in from multiple angles, their weapons creating a cacophony of destructive energy. Each shot was different, each approach unexpected. The Hive ship's defenses, designed to analyze and counter coordinated attacks, found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of the assault. When the Hive ship finally broke apart, it didn't explode like a normal vessel. Instead, it seemed to come apart from the inside, its organic components rejecting its mechanical parts, like a body rejecting a transplanted organ. The sight sent a clear message to both sides. The rules of space warfare had just changed forever. Message from the Nexus fleet, Rivera announced, surprise evident in her voice. They're pulling back. The entire fleet is beginning to retreat. They're not retreating, Dr. Patel said quietly, studying her readings. They're adapting. Look at their energy signatures. They're already starting to modify their organic components. They won't fall for the same tricks next time. Chen watched as the massive Nexus fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind the wreckage of their destroyed Hive ship. Then we'll come up with new tricks. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our discipline. It's our creativity, our ability to improvise, to break rules, to do the unexpected. She turned to her crew, seeing the same mix of exhaustion and exhilaration on their faces that she felt herself. This was just the first battle. The Nexus will be back, and they'll be ready for what we did today. But that's fine, because next time, we'll do something completely different. As the fleet regrouped and began assessing the damage, Chen couldn't help but smile. For the first time since the Nexus appeared, humanity had a fighting chance. Not because they'd built better ships or developed superior weapons, but because they'd embraced what made them human. Their beautiful, wonderful imperfection. The heart of the storm. 3 weeks after humanity's first victory, Ganymede Station had transformed from a military outpost into something that would have given any traditional naval officer a headache. The once pristine hangars now buzzed with controlled chaos as engineering teams deliberately introduced flaws into ship systems. Dr. Patel supervised the organized madness, her original theories about controlled imperfection evolving into a new school of military engineering. Admiral Chen watched from a maintenance gantry as the destroyer Artemis underwent its transformation. The ship's weapon systems were being rebuilt with asymmetrical power distributions, its engines modified to produce erratic but controlled energy signatures. Below, she could hear Captain Walsh teaching a group of officers what he called jazz warfare. Forget everything you know about proper combat patterns, Walsh was saying. The moment you try to fight by the book is the moment you die. When you face the Nexus, you need to feel the flow of battle. React, improvise, surprise yourself. Because if you surprise yourself, you'll definitely surprise them. Admiral, Lieutenant Rivera's voice came through her comm. Long-range sensors have detected multiple Nexus signatures approaching the Kuiper Belt. Initial analysis suggests they've modified their biomechanical interfaces. Chen wasn't surprised. The Nexus weren't stupid. They were learning, adapting. But so was humanity. How many ships do we have ready? 15 modified vessels, including the Hyperion. Another 10 are partially converted, but haven't been tested in combat conditions. It'll have to do. Chen straightened her uniform. Signal all ships. Combat stations. The fleet that assembled near Pluto's orbit bore little resemblance to the orderly formation that had defended Ganymede weeks ago. The modified ships arranged themselves in deliberately irregular patterns, their energy signatures fluctuating in ways that would have once been considered malfunctions. The remaining conventional vessels formed a loose support screen, ready to adapt to whatever madness was about to unfold. When the Nexus fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, Chen immediately noticed the changes. The biomechanical ships still maintained their geometric formations, but their organic components pulsed with new rhythms. They'd altered their very biology to better handle chaos. All ships, Chen broadcast, execute Protocol Jazz. Remember, the moment they adapt to one pattern, switch to another. Don't think about what makes sense. Think about what they'd never expect. The battle that followed made their previous engagement look orderly by comparison. The modified human ships moved like a swarm of angry wasps, each following its own erratic course, while somehow maintaining just enough coordination to avoid friendly fire. Their weapons fired in completely unpredictable patterns, the energy beams wobbling and fluctuating in ways that defy physics. The Nexus responded with their own adaptations. Their ship's organic components now pulsed with multiple rhythms simultaneously, trying to create counter-patterns to the human chaos. When one approach failed, they would rapidly shift to another, showing a level of tactical flexibility they'd never displayed before. They're learning, Dr. Patel observed from her station on the Hyperion. Their organic systems are attempting to generate controlled randomness. They're trying to beat us at our own game. But they're still thinking about it, Walsh replied with a grin. They're trying to calculate chaos. That's like trying to plan spontaneity. It defeats the whole purpose. Chen watched as a group of Nexus ships coordinated their fire on the destroyer Magellan. The attack was impressive. Energy beams pulsing with irregular rhythms, mimicking human unpredictability. But Captain Rodriguez, the Magellan's commander, had been a jazz musician before joining the Navy. His ship danced through the deadly barrage with true improvisation, retaliating with a series of shots that looked more like a freestyle dance than military tactics. Status report, Chen demanded as the battle intensified. 3 Nexus ships heavily damaged, Rivera reported. We've lost contact with the Odyssey, but visual confirmation shows they're still fighting. The Nexus are adapting faster than in our first engagement, but they're still struggling with true randomness. A massive explosion lit up space as one of the Nexus ships finally succumbed to the chaotic assault. But unlike their first battle, the destruction wasn't clean. The ship's modified organic components fought against their own dissolution, creating a twisted light show of biological and mechanical energy. New contacts. Rivera's voice rose with urgency. Multiple Nexus signatures dropping out of FTL. These ones are different. The reinforcements that arrived proved just how seriously the Nexus were taking the human threat. These ships were smaller, their forms more twisted and complex. Gone were the perfect geometric patterns, replaced by asymmetrical designs that seemed to writhe and shift in space. They've done it, Dr. Patel whispered, staring at her readings. They've modified their entire construction philosophy. These ships weren't grown in perfect conditions. They were deliberately stressed during development, exposed to chaos to build up tolerance. Chen felt a smile spread across her face. They still don't understand. They're trying to industrialize chaos, to mass-produce unpredictability. That's not how it works. She opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, show them the difference between manufactured chaos and true human improvisation. The battle evolved into something that defied traditional military analysis. The new Nexus ships were formidable, their irregular patterns making them harder to predict. But there was still an underlying logic to their chaos, a pattern in their unpredictability. The human ships, guided by intuition and instinct, continued to find ways to surprise them. Hyperion, this is Magellan. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm. Permission to try something incredibly stupid. Chen glanced at Walsh, who nodded enthusiastically. Permission granted, Captain. Show us what you've got. The Magellan suddenly cut all power to its weapons, using the energy to overload its engines instead. The ship spun through space like a thrown knife, its hull crackling with uncontrolled energy. The nearest Nexus vessels, their biological components trying to process this seemingly suicidal maneuver, hesitated for a crucial moment. When the Magellan released all that built-up energy in a single chaotic burst, the result exceeded everyone's expectations. The pulse of uncontrolled energy created a cascade effect in the Nexus ship's organic systems. Like a virus spreading through a population, the chaos propagated from ship to ship, overwhelming their attempts to adapt. 3 enemy vessels lost cohesion almost simultaneously, their biomechanical components tearing themselves apart in their attempt to process the unpredictable. All ships, Chen ordered, follow the Magellan's lead. Don't copy them exactly, improvise your own version. Show these perfect beings what humanity does best. The void of space lit up with dozens of unique variations on the Magellan's maneuver. Each human ship found its own way to channel chaos, creating a symphony of destruction that no tactical computer could have predicted. The Nexus fleet, faced with an enemy that turned apparent suicide into victory, began to withdraw. As the last enemy ships retreated, Chen turned to Dr. Patel. How long until they adapt to this? They already are, Patel replied. But that's the beauty of it, Admiral. By the time they figure out how to counter what we did today, we'll have come up with something even crazier. They're trying to solve chaos like it's an engineering problem. We're just letting it flow naturally. Chen nodded, watching the fleet regroup. Humanity had won another battle, but the war was far from over. The Nexus would return with new adaptations and countermeasures, but that was fine, because humans would keep improvising, keep breaking rules, keep finding new ways to turn their imperfections into strengths. In the endless dance between order and chaos, humanity had found its rhythm. Evolution of war. The holographic display in Ganymede Station's Strategic Command Center showed something that should have been impossible. Admiral Chen, Captain Walsh, and Dr. Patel watched in fascination as the recording played again. A Nexus ship attempting to dance. They've been studying us, Patel said, manipulating the display to zoom in on the alien vessel's movements. Look at how the organic components pulse. They're trying to mimic the irregularity of our attack patterns. But there's something off about it. Walsh nodded, his experienced eye catching the subtle tells. It's like watching someone try to play jazz after only reading about it in books. The notes are right, but there's no soul to it. The Nexus ship in the recording moved with calculated irregularity, its energy weapons firing in carefully measured patterns of chaos. It was an impressive attempt at copying humanity's new combat style, but it lacked the true spontaneity that made the human approach so effective. They're evolving faster than we anticipated, Chen observed. But they're still trying to solve this like an engineering problem. They think if they can just create the perfect formula for imperfection, they'll beat us at our own game. Speaking of evolution, Walsh said, pulling up another display, you need to see what's happening with our own ships. The image showed the interior of the Hyperion's engine room. The hybrid systems they'd created by merging human technology with salvaged Nexus components had begun to change. The biological elements weren't just adapting to chaos, they were starting to generate it naturally. It's like we've infected their technology with humanity, Patel explained, excitement clear in her voice. The organic components are learning to embrace imperfection rather than fight it. Each time we introduce a new form of chaos, they don't just adapt, they evolve. Chen was about to respond when Lieutenant Rivera burst into the room. Admiral, we're detecting massive Nexus fleet movements. Multiple battle groups converging on the Kuiper Belt. Early analysis suggests they've developed something new. The tactical display shifted to show the approaching Nexus forces. Their ships still maintained the familiar biomechanical construction, but the formations were unlike anything they'd seen before. Instead of geometric patterns, the Nexus vessels moved in fluid, organic waves that seemed almost human. They're not just copying our tactics anymore, Walsh observed. They're trying to understand why they work. They're experimenting. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. The Nexus had always been dangerous because of their technological superiority. But now they were showing signs of true adaptation, not just biological or mechanical, but philosophical. "How many ships do we have ready?" she asked. 25 fully modified vessels, Rivera reported. "And something else you should see. The civilian shipyards have been sending us volunteers, people who've been modifying their own ships based on our public battle footage. They're not military, but they're human," Chen finished. "And right now, that's our greatest weapon. Signal all ships, military and civilian. Let's show the Nexus what happens when humanity really cuts loose." The battle that followed defied conventional military analysis. The Nexus fleet approached using their new pseudo-human tactics, their ships moving with artificial randomness. But they faced not just trained military vessels, but civilian ships piloted by everyone from former racing pilots to deep space prospectors. Each brought their own brand of controlled chaos to the fight. Mining vessel Cardinal requesting permission to engage. A gruff voice came through the comm. "We've modified our mineral extraction beams with salvaged Nexus tech. Can't guarantee what'll happen when we fire, but it should be interesting." Chen watched as the Cardinal, a civilian mining ship that looked like it had been modified in someone's garage, joined the battle line. "Permission granted. Show us what you've got." The Cardinal's improvised weapons proved devastatingly effective. The modified mining beams created unpredictable energy patterns that the Nexus ship's organic components simply couldn't process. Where military weapons followed at least some basic principles, these jury-rigged civilian modifications operated on pure human ingenuity. "They're trying to adapt," Paddle reported, studying the sensor readings. "The Nexus ships are attempting to generate truly random patterns now. They've abandoned their previous algorithms entirely." Walsh grinned. "But they're still thinking about being random. That's their problem. You can't plan spontaneity." The battle swirled through space like a chaotic dance, with human and Nexus ships weaving complex patterns through the void. But where the Nexus movements showed calculated attempts at unpredictability, the human ships moved with true improvisation. Military vessels performed maneuvers that violated basic combat doctrine, while civilian ships introduced their own brand of creative insanity to the mix. "Admiral," Rivera called out, "we're detecting unusual energy patterns from the Nexus flagship. They're trying to communicate." The message that came through wasn't in any human language. Instead, it was a series of energy pulses, each one unique and unpredictable. It took Chen a moment to realize what she was seeing. "They're not attacking," she said softly. "They're trying to learn. They've realized that they can't beat us by copying our tactics. They need to understand the source of our chaos." Patel's eyes widened as she analyzed the transmission. The patterns, they're asking questions, not with words, but with energy frequencies. They're trying to understand the fundamental difference between their manufactured randomness and our natural improvisation. Chen made a decision that would have seemed insane just months ago. Send them a response. Not in their language or ours. Send them jazz. The Hyperion's communications array, modified with the same principles as their weapons, began broadcasting the irregular rhythms of ancient Earth jazz music into space. The Nexus ship's organic components pulsed in response, trying to understand this pure expression of human creativity. "They're processing it," Paddle reported. "Their biomechanical systems are. Wait, something's changing." The nearest Nexus ships began to move differently. Gone were the calculated attempts at randomness. Instead, their movements became truly unpredictable, as if they were finally beginning to grasp the essence of improvisation. They're not just adapting anymore, Walsh observed. They're evolving. And so are we. Chen watched as human and Nexus ships continued their dance through space, no longer fighting but exploring the boundaries between order and chaos together. The war wasn't over. There would be more battles, more evolution on both sides. But something fundamental had changed. In trying to defeat humanity by understanding chaos, the Nexus had begun to change their very nature. And in learning to weaponize their inherent unpredictability, humanity had discovered new aspects of themselves. The line between the two species was starting to blur, creating something entirely new in the process. Send word to all ships, Chen ordered. The next phase of this war isn't about destruction. It's about creation. Let's show them everything we've got. As the fleet acknowledged her orders, Chen smiled. The Nexus had come to Earth expecting to find primitive beings to consume. Instead, they'd found teachers who would help them transcend their own perfection. Humanity's edge. The largest Nexus fleet ever recorded dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Saturn's rings. Hundreds of biomechanical ships, from massive hive vessels to smaller, more agile craft, arranged themselves in a formation that would have been impossible just months ago. It wasn't the perfect geometric pattern they'd once favored, nor was it the calculated chaos they'd attempted to copy from humans. Instead, it was something entirely new, a fluid, living arrangement that seemed to pulse with its own creativity. Admiral Chen stood on the Hyperion's bridge, watching the display with a mixture of appreciation and concern. The human fleet that faced them was equally impressive. Military vessels modified with hybrid technology flew alongside civilian ships, sporting improvised weapons and jerry-rigged systems. Each was unique, a reflection of humanity's boundless creativity. "They're broadcasting," Lieutenant Rivera announced, "but not on any standard frequency. They're using music." The signal filled the bridge, a strange, haunting melody that combined the mathematical precision of the Nexus with the spontaneous creativity of human jazz. It was neither a surrender nor a challenge, but something far more interesting. An invitation. "They've been learning," Dr. Paddle said, analyzing the signal. "Not just copying our methods, but truly understanding them. This music, it's their attempt to show us they finally get it." Captain Walsh nodded, a smile playing at his lips. "They're not just mimicking chaos anymore. They're creating it themselves. The question is, what do they want to do with it?" The answer came in the form of a second transmission, this one a complex pattern of energy pulses that their hybrid systems could now interpret. The message was simple but profound. "Show us more." Chen exchanged glances with her senior staff. The Nexus had come to Earth as conquerors, seeking to consume and adapt. But in trying to defeat humanity's chaotic nature, they'd been transformed by it. Now they sought not to destroy, but to learn. "All ships," Chen broadcast to the fleet, "initiate Protocol Symphony. Show them everything we've got, but keep your distance. Let's treat this like a dance, not a duel." What followed was unlike anything in human or Nexus history. The two fleets began to move through space in complex patterns, each responding to the other's movements. Human ships would perform impossible maneuvers, their hybrid systems pushing the boundaries of physics. The Nexus vessels would observe, analyze, and then respond with their own interpretations, adding their unique perspective to the dance. "Look at their organic components," Patel observed, studying the sensor readings. "They're not just adapting anymore. They're creating new patterns spontaneously. They've learned to truly improvise." Walsh watched as a group of civilian ships, led by the mining vessel Cardinal, demonstrated their modified weapon systems. Instead of firing to destroy, they created intricate patterns of energy that the Nexus ships absorbed and analyzed, their biomechanical systems processing and learning from each display. "They're teaching each other," Chen realized. "We show them chaos. They show us how to control it. We demonstrate improvisation. They reveal the underlying patterns we never noticed. The space around Saturn became a laboratory of innovation as human and Nexus ships pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Civilian engineers worked alongside military specialists, combining their jury-rigged modifications with advanced alien technology. The Nexus, in turn, shared insights into how their organic components processed and generated chaos, leading to new breakthroughs in hybrid system design. "Admiral," Rivera called out, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the largest high ship. They're changing their entire structure." The massive Nexus vessel began to transform before their eyes. Its perfectly ordered surfaces became more fluid, more organic. The distinction between biological and mechanical components began to blur as the ship embraced a new philosophy of existence, one that balanced order and chaos, precision and creativity. "They're not just learning our tactics," Paddle said in awe. "They're incorporating our entire approach to existence. The very thing that made them want to destroy us, our unpredictability, has become what they most want to understand." The transformation spread through the Nexus fleet like a wave, each ship adapting in its own unique way. Some became more organic, others more mechanical, but all of them exhibited a new flexibility that would have been impossible before their encounter with humanity. "Incoming transmission," Rivera announced. "They're using multiple forms of communication simultaneously, energy patterns, music, and, is that poetry?" The message that came through was complex and layered, but its meaning was clear. The Nexus had come seeking perfection, believing that consuming humanity would help them achieve it. Instead, they discovered that true perfection lay not in flawless execution, but in the ability to embrace imperfection and grow from it. "They want to establish permanent contact," Chen translated, reading through the layers of communication. "Not as conquerors or subjects, but as partners. They think the combination of their orderly nature and our chaotic creativity could lead to something entirely new." Walsh laughed. "All this because we decided to break every rule in the book and fight like crazy people." "Not crazy," Paddle corrected him. "Human. We showed them something they'd never encountered before. A species that didn't just accept chaos, but thrived on it. We turned our greatest weakness into our greatest strength." Chen looked out at the combined fleet, where human and Nexus ships now moved together in a complex dance of order and chaos. The war had evolved into something far more interesting than a simple conflict. It had become a catalyst for change, pushing both species to transcend their limitations. "Send word to Earth," she ordered. "Tell them the war is over, but our work is just beginning. The Nexus aren't our enemies anymore. They're our students, our teachers, and maybe something more. We're going to show them everything we know about chaos, creativity, and the art of improvisation, and they're going to help us understand how to channel it in ways we never imagined." As the message was sent, Chen watched a group of civilian ships attempting to teach a Nexus vessel how to perform a maneuver they'd invented just that morning. The alien ship's attempts were clumsy at first, but it kept trying, each iteration getting closer to capturing the true spirit of the movement. "Humanity's greatest strength," Chen mused, "was never our technology, our weapons, or even our tactics. It was our ability to embrace the unexpected, to find beauty in imperfection, and to share that vision with others, even if those others came to destroy us." The combined fleet continued its dance around Saturn's rings, each movement writing a new chapter in the story of two species learning to see the universe through each other's eyes. The perfect geometric patterns of the past were gone, replaced by something far more interesting, a confluence of order and chaos, precision and creativity, planning and improvisation. In the end, humanity hadn't just survived the Nexus invasion. They'd turned it into the greatest teaching opportunity in history, showing an ancient and powerful species that true perfection wasn't about eliminating chaos, but about learning to dance with it. And in space, the dance continued, growing more complex and beautiful with each passing moment.